This question comes from Shane from Brandon. In my opinion, Carey Price is your greatest pick. How on earth did you decide on number 31? Next to Crosby, he was the pick of the draft. You know what? We had a list of players at that time. Going into that draft, it was during a lockout year. So the entire NHL was were lottery picks. I guess luckily we ended up with the 5th overall pick, which was a bit of a nail biter. We had players that we thought would be blue chip or franchise potential NHLers, and Carey Price was one of them. Luckily, when it came our pick, he was still there, but it was a difficult decision to make at the time for our group, and I have to commend Bob Gainey for stepping up and letting us make that pick. You know, at the time we had Jose Theodore and Garon in the system, so to pick a goalie, you have to have you couldn't just look at the close future. You had to project and look down the road. And luckily for us, we selected Carey where we did, and we all know what happened since then. Now we move on to the second question of the day, and it's from Jeremy. Do you think that letting European prospects develop overseas rather than the AHL is a good thing or a bad thing? That's on an individual basis. What's good for one player isn't necessarily good for the other player. We believe in our development system in the American Hockey League and the junior system over here, as well as the way the Europeans run things. We've had success with Lehkonen over with playing in Frölunda. They have a really good development system there, especially their off-ice training. And he's a special case that happened for us. And I can't say that'll never happen again with other prospects. But again, it's on an individual player basis. Now we move on to the third question, and that's from Anthony Brayall. How is Martin Rewe doing? That's an excellent question. I was asking that myself today. Martin is back home in Slovakia. He's recovering from a major health problem that he's had, and he's on meds right now, and he's back training, and we're hopeful that he will be in good enough condition and more so that he's healthy enough to live his life normally and to eventually come off his meds and to be able to be here for our rookie camp and rookie tournament coming up in September, where hopefully you fans will be able to get another look at him. Now we move on to the fourth question, and that comes from Cory. Do you think Joni Ikonen is going to be a stud? Well, we're not into drafting racehorses here, Cory, but he's going to be a good hockey. He is a good hockey player. It's not whether he's going to be or not. He was the top centerman for the Finnish under-18 national team, and he'll be at the Finnish under-20 World Junior Camp. Hopefully we get to see him coming up the first week of August in Plymouth, where he will suit up for the Finnish national team under-20s and play against the likes of Canada, the United States, and Sweden World Junior teams. We move on to Roch Savard, and he asks, do you do interviews with all prospects, like Hischier, Patrick, Glass, etc., just in case? We have our area scouts do interviews, as well as myself and Shane Churla throughout the course of the season. When we come to the NHL Combine, when we interview players, we try to interview as many as we can. Obviously, we don't interview the very top end of the draft class, because basically there's no chance of securing that high end of a pick. If it ever came to it where we thought we might get that high end selection, we would interview them at that time in a more in-depth basis. For example, Ryan Poehling, we interviewed him at the Combine, and our management staff was there. Unfortunately, Marc Bergevin had to leave at that time, so we brought him back at the draft to our hotel, and we had Marc spend some time with him as well. Now we move on to the next question from Dalton Uffcrab, and he's asking, I'd like to ask Trevor how far Nikita Scherbak is from the NHL, and what is his ceiling? Well, that's a very good question, because I have a quote from that Bill Belichick uses, and you know, talent gets you to the floor is what Mr. Belichick says, and character gets you to the ceiling. So we're hoping Nikita can continue to take that character and lift his game up to eventually play at the National Hockey League level. I want everyone to understand that Nikita is what we call a late birth. He was born between September and December. So instead of, after being selected by the Montreal Canadiens, going back and playing 2 years of junior, like a regular birth would, he only went back and played 1 year. Same as with Nathan Beaulieu, same as with Brett Lerner. So that first year at the American Hockey League level is very difficult because they're the youngest players in the league. So usually that is a full development year for them. It's a learning experience. Then the next year you really see them start to take off, which Nikita in the second half of last season in the playoffs really stepped up his game. His ceiling is up to him. We drafted him for his talent. He's got top 6 talent and potential. Whether he reaches that potential is up to him, and we're trying to give him everything that we can, all the resources and experience and knowledge for him to reach that level. So we'll see at training camp and moving forward how Nikita does. Now to move on to the next question from Thomas Valin. What are the most important characteristics you look for in a prospect? Today's NHL, we can all agree that it's changed. Today's NHL game requires more speed, and with a game with more speed, you have to be able to think the game quicker. So we're looking for players that can skate and that can think the game very quick. That's the difference. And also now, the undersized players are having a better chance of playing. We're seeing more and more undersized players like Paul Byron, for example, with our team, being able to execute here and not get hooked and hold, and size doesn't matter as much in today's game. Now we move on to the next viewer's question, and it's from Joe Eves. Did you have any Quebecers on your radar at the draft? And if so, which ones? I'm assuming by Quebecers you mean Francophone players that live in the province of Quebec, and of course we do. I can't tell you which players, but you can assume the ones that were drafted. We did try to move up in the second round to secure one, but we couldn't find a dance player to make that trade with. We put a lot of emphasis in getting Francophones as high on our list as we can, you know, without jeopardizing our draft board with players that have more of a floor with talent and ceiling with their character. Moving on to the next question. Ask Trevor the greatest strength to look for in a defenseman. That's another good question. That relates to one of the questions I just answered, and that is skating. Nowadays, the D-men, they have to get back, they have to pivot and get back and retrieve pucks as quick as they can and try to give themselves enough time and space to move pucks quickly up the ice. So you need defensemen that can really skate. Skating's got to be is the top asset now. And again, to be able to think quick under pressure and to have good vision, to see the play up the ice and developing play. Coaches nowadays, they want players, the D-men, to get back, get pucks, and move it up ice as quickly as possible and initiate that transition game. We move on now to the next question. Ask Trevor, who's the best player you drafted and the best player you didn't draft but could have? The best player obviously has to be one of the best goaltenders in the draft, and that's Carey Price. But I just want to point out too, we drafted Jaro Halak in the 9th round of the NHL draft, and he was a heck of a goalie for the Habs as well. If we move on to the next question, Brian Curley asks Trevor, how are you liking the development of Jake Evans, and what do you think he projects as? Good question, because Jake's here at our development camp, and he only gets to come to our summer development camps because he plays college hockey at the NCAA level. He plays for Notre Dame, and he'll be going back this year as a senior. I imagine he'll be the captain. What I like about Jake's game is that he's a real cerebral player. He really thinks the game well, has high-end hockey sense, and is a strong playmaker. Jake's got to continue to work on his explosiveness and quickness, and he's in the right place to do that. Hopefully next year we will see him in a Montreal Canadiens uniform. Moving on to the next question from Random ADHD Thoughts. Ask Trevor, how does the 2018 draft class compare to the 2017? It's a difficult comparison to make. We'll have to get through the season next year and see how these young players that we saw as underagers this year, how much they develop and what their ceilings are going to be. It's difficult to compare draft classes until 5, 6, 7 years down the road when you see where those players end up, whether they make the NHL, they're minor league players, or they never play a game of pro. Now we move on to Reeves Matheson. How much can you bench? It's not how much you can bench, it's the quality of reps that you do. Don't forget that. Once in my life, I did do 500 pounds. That's a long, long, long time ago. Thank you.